The rain hammered against the windows of their downtown Seattle loft as Emma Cole watched a husband of 8 years pack his belongings into expensive leather suitcases. David Cole, newly promoted Chief Technology Officer at NextGen Healthcare Solutions, moved with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd made his decision weeks ago. "I've already signed the lease on a new place," David said without looking at her, his voice flat and businesslike. "You'll need to find somewhere else to live by the end of the month. This loft is too expensive for someone without income." Emma stood frozen in the kitchen of the home she'd secretly purchased 5 years ago through a private trust. The morning light caught the simple gold band on her finger, a ring David had chosen, never knowing his wife could have bought the entire jewelry store without checking her bank balance. "David, can we at least talk about this?" Emma's voice remained steady despite the tremor in her chest. He finally turned to face her, his expression a mixture of impatience and something that looked almost like pity. "Talk about what, Emma? The fact that you've done nothing with your life for 8 years? That while I've been building my career, you've been... what exactly? Taking online courses that go nowhere. Volunteering at hospitals like you're still trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up." What David didn't know was that Emma spent 40 hours each week managing NextGen Healthcare Solutions from behind a carefully constructed corporate veil. The online courses were actually virtual board meetings. The volunteer work was site inspections of their hospital partnerships. She was the invisible force behind every major decision he celebrated as his own achievement. "I thought we were partners," Emma said quietly. David laughed, sharp and bitter. "Partners? Emma, partners contribute equally. I make $780,000 a year. You make 0. I network with industry leaders. You network with book club friends. We're not partners. I've been carrying you, and I'm done." He gestured toward the window where a sleek Tesla waited at the curb. "Jessica's waiting for me. She's the new VP of Operations. Smart, ambitious, someone who actually understands my world. We're attending a board dinner tonight. She's the kind of woman who can stand beside me at corporate events and actually hold a conversation about healthcare technology." Emma felt her heart crack, but her voice remained calm. "Jessica Chen? Your VP of Operations?" "Yes. Finally, someone who operates at my level." He zipped the last suitcase with an air of finality. "My lawyer will contact yours about the divorce. Don't expect much. The prenup is clear. You'll get enough to get on your feet, maybe finally motivate you to get an actual job." The prenup he referenced had been drafted by Emma's attorneys, containing clauses his cheaper lawyer had completely misunderstood. But she said nothing, watching as the man she'd loved for nearly a decade demonstrated exactly who he'd become when he thought he had all the power. "I hope you'll be happy," Emma said softly. David paused at the door, something flickering across his face that might have been guilt. "Look, Emma, this isn't personal. You're a nice person. But nice doesn't build empires. In 5 years, I'll probably be CEO of NextGen. Jessica and I are going places. You deserve someone who wants a simple life, because that's all you're capable of." The door closed behind him with a gentle click that echoed like thunder in the empty loft. Emma stood motionless for 60 seconds, feeling the weight of 8 years of carefully maintained secrecy pressing against her chest. Then she walked to the window and watched David load his bags into Jessica's car, a company car Emma had approved through 3 levels of corporate authorization, and drive away from the building Emma owned through Cascade Property Holdings LLC. She pulled out her phone and made 3 calls, to her personal attorney, to her chief financial officer, and to the chairman of NextGen's board, a position she'd held anonymously for 6 years through encrypted voting systems and proxy arrangements. By sunset, the machinery would be in motion. Her grandfather's test was finally over. David had shown her exactly who he was when he thought she had no power. Now it was time to show him who she'd been all along. Emma Cole, the unemployed wife, was about to introduce herself to the world as Emma Hartley Cole, the billionaire founder and majority owner of NextGen Healthcare Solutions, the $38 billion empire her grandmother had built from a single nursing home in 1968. If you're enjoying this story of hidden power and ultimate revelation, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Emma should do next. Chapter is coming up. You won't want to miss what happens when David walks into the office tomorrow. The executive conference room on the 42nd floor of NextGen Tower was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Seattle's skyline, while a table of polished granite stretched beneath lighting that cost more than most people's cars. David arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to project the eagerness and dedication that had carried him from senior developer to CTO in just 7 years. He'd barely slept, adrenaline coursing through him as he imagined his future with Jessica. She'd texted him at midnight, heard rumors about major announcements tomorrow. Could be your moment. He'd replied with a confidence emoji, believing himself ready for whatever opportunity was coming. The room filled gradually with familiar faces, the CFO, general counsel, VPs from every division, and several board members David recognized from company newsletters but had never met personally. The energy felt strange, charged with an anticipation he couldn't quite identify. Jessica slipped in just before 9, shooting him a conspiratorial smile before taking her seat 3 chairs away. At exactly 9 a.m., the door opened, and David's world tilted sideways. Emma walked in, but not the Emma he knew. This Emma wore a charcoal Armani pantsuit that probably cost more than the monthly rent he'd just informed her she couldn't afford. Her hair was styled in a sleek professional cut, diamond earrings glittered at her ears, and she carried herself with an authority that seemed to shift the very air in the room. David's first thought was confusion. Had Emma gotten some sort of administrative job at NextGen? Was this an embarrassing coincidence? But then she walked directly to the head of the table, to the CEO's chair, and sat down with the natural confidence of someone who'd occupied that space 1,000 times before. "Good morning, everyone," Emma began, her voice carrying the crisp professionalism of a seasoned executive. "Thank you for attending on short notice. I know many of you have questions, so let me address them directly." David felt ice water flooding his veins. "My name is Emma Hartley Cole, though most of you know me as E. Hartley from Board Communications, or simply as the anonymous majority shareholder referenced in company documentation. For the past 8 years, I've managed NextGen remotely, attending board meetings via secure video, making strategic decisions through proxy voting, and maintaining my privacy as per my grandmother's wishes when she passed the company to me." The room was utterly silent except for David's ragged breathing. Jessica had gone pale, her confident smirk evaporating like morning fog. "My grandmother, Eleanor Hartley, founded NextGen Healthcare Solutions in 1968 with a single nursing home in Tacoma. When she passed 9 years ago, she left me controlling interest, 71% of all shares, currently valued at approximately $27 billion. I've remained anonymous to observe how the company operated without the influence of visible ownership, to ensure that merit determined success rather than politics or personal relationships." David tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. This couldn't be real. This had to be some sort of elaborate nightmare. "However," Emma continued, her voice hardening like steel, "recent events have made it clear that anonymity has allowed certain behaviors to flourish that I can no longer ignore. It's time for transparency, accountability, and significant restructuring of leadership." Her eyes found David's, and the look she gave him was surgical in its precision. "David Cole, Chief Technology Officer. Your technical performance over 7 years has been satisfactory, which is why I approved most of your promotions. However, I've recently conducted a more thorough review of your expense reports and found concerning patterns. Tell me, do you remember the technology conference in San Francisco 3 weeks ago? The one that cost the company $18,000 in hotel, travel, and meal expenses?" David's throat had closed completely. He couldn't have spoken if his life depended on it. "Because according to the investigation I commissioned," Emma said, pulling out a folder, "you weren't at a technology conference. You were at the Ritz-Carlton with Jessica Chen, using company funds to finance a personal relationship. That's fraud, David. Corporate theft. And it's grounds for immediate termination and potential criminal prosecution." Jessica made a small, strangled sound. Her direct supervisor, the COO, had his head in his hands. But let's discuss the more interesting situation, Emma said, her tone dropping to something dangerously quiet. The loft you just told me I need to vacate by the end of the month because it's too expensive for someone without income. She pulled out another document, sliding it across the table where David could see the property deed. I purchased that building through Cascade Property Holdings 6 years ago. The rent you believed you were paying? It was deposited into a managed account I established to maintain your illusion of financial independence. Your name isn't on the lease, David. Mine is. You're not the tenant of record. I am. You haven't paid a single dollar toward our home, you just thought you did. David finally found his voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. Emma. This can't. Can't what? She asked coldly. Can't be real? Can't be legal? Can't be fair? Let me be very clear about your situation. You used company resources to conduct an affair with a subordinate, creating both ethical violations and potential harassment liability. You committed fraud on expense reports. I have documentation of at least $47,000 in fraudulent claims over the past 8 months. You attempted to evict the legal property owner from her own residence. And perhaps most significantly, you systematically demeaned and abandoned your wife while benefiting from her resources in ways you were too arrogant to even notice. She stood, and her presence seemed to fill the entire room. Effective immediately, you are terminated from NextGen Healthcare Solutions. Security will escort you from the building within the next 10 minutes. Your final paycheck will reflect deductions for documented fraudulent expenses. The signing bonus you received with your CTO promotion, $250,000, is forfeit per Clause 7.3 of your employment contract, which I'm certain you didn't read carefully. Legal will pursue full recovery of those funds. David sat paralyzed as Emma's words echoed through the conference room. Around him, executives shifted uncomfortably, some looking shocked, others nodding as if pieces of a complex puzzle were finally clicking into place. The COO looked particularly pale. He'd clearly suspected nothing about the relationship between his CTO and VP of operations. Additionally, Emma continued, her voice steady and professional, the Mercedes you've been driving, the one you told me last week was a reward for your hard work, is a company vehicle assigned to C-suite executives. You'll surrender it to security along with your access badges, laptop, and company phone. She turned her attention to Jessica, who had shrunk so far down in her leather chair she looked like she wanted to disappear into it entirely. Ms. Chen, you're also terminated effective immediately. Your involvement in the expense fraud makes you complicit in corporate theft. More significantly, your relationship with a married executive while both of you held senior positions creates liability issues this company cannot tolerate. You'll surrender all company property and access credentials before leaving the building. Jessica's carefully constructed professional mask shattered. I didn't know he was still married, she burst out, her voice shaking. David said the divorce was already finalized, that it was just paperwork at this point. Emma's expression didn't change. Ms. Chen, basic due diligence would have revealed that David's marital status was unchanged. But you were too focused on what you perceived as his trajectory, his power, his potential access to the CEO position. Neither of you suspected that the real power in this company was at home in yoga pants, watching both of you destroy your careers through your own arrogance and dishonesty. David tried one more time to speak, his voice cracking. Emma, please. This is insane. We can discuss this privately. This is our marriage, our personal life. We don't have a marriage anymore, David, Emma said flatly. You ended it yesterday morning when you packed your bags and informed me I was dead weight with no ambition. As for privacy, you forfeited that when you used company resources for fraud and brought your affair partner into the corporate hierarchy. These are now business matters, and I'm addressing them as the owner and CEO of this company. She gestured toward the door where 2 security officers had appeared. Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Cole and Ms. Chen from the premises. Human Resources will handle the remaining termination procedures and coordinate with legal regarding the criminal referral for expense fraud. As security approached, David felt reality crashing down on him with crushing weight. The loft wasn't his. The car wasn't his. His job was gone. His reputation would be destroyed. And the woman he'd dismissed as having no prospects or ambition had just revealed herself as a billionaire who'd controlled his entire career trajectory without him ever knowing. "Where will I go?" The words came out as a desperate whisper. "Emma, I have nothing. No apartment, no car, no job. You're leaving me with nothing." Emma looked at him with something that might have been pity, but her eyes remained cold. "You called me dead weight yesterday, David. You said I contributed nothing, that I had no ambition, no drive, no value. You told me I needed to get an actual job and make something of myself. Let's see how you manage when you actually have nothing and need to build something from scratch. Maybe you'll learn empathy. Though I doubt it." "Please," David tried again, tears forming in his eyes as security took position on either side of him. "I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Don't do this. We can fix this. I love you." "You love what you thought I was," Emma replied, her voice quiet but cutting. "Someone powerless. Someone dependent. Someone you could feel superior to. You loved having a wife you could condescend to, someone who made you feel important and successful by comparison. But the real me? The woman with the intelligence, resources, and capability to build and run a multi-billion-dollar healthcare empire? You never looked for her, David. You were too busy looking down to ever truly see me." Security began guiding him toward the door. Jessica was already being escorted out by a second team, her expensive handbag clutched to her chest, her carefully curated professional image in ruins. At the door, David turned back one final time. "I don't understand. Why did you hide this? Why did you let me think I was providing for us? Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Emma met his eyes steadily. "My grandmother left me this company with one condition, that I maintain anonymity for at least 5 years, operating through corporate structures and proxy votes. She wanted me to learn who people truly were when they didn't know I held power over them. Hidden power reveals truth," she told me before she died. "Let people think you're ordinary. Watch who treats you with respect anyway. Who loves you for yourself, not for what you can provide. That's how you'll know who deserves to be in your life when you finally step into the light." Her expression hardened. "You failed that test spectacularly, David. You didn't just fail to respect me, you actively demeaned me, betrayed me, and discarded me the moment you thought you'd outgrown me. I gave you 8 years and countless opportunities to show me your true character. Yesterday morning, you finally did." The door closed behind David Cole as security led him away from the executive floor of the company his wife owned, away from the career she'd secretly built for him, and toward a future he'd have to construct entirely on his own merit, something he'd never actually done before. In the conference room, the remaining executives sat in stunned silence until the CFO began to clap. Slowly, others joined, the applause building as Emma Hartley Cole stood before them not as David's unemployed wife, but as the CEO and majority owner of NextGen Healthcare Solutions. She'd hidden in plain sight for 8 years. Now, finally, she was stepping fully into the light. And the revelation had destroyed the man who'd been too blind to see her all along. David Cole sat in the lobby of the NextGen building, still unable to fully process what had happened. The security guards had been professional but firm, watching as he emptied his pockets, surrendered his access badge, and signed paperwork acknowledging his termination. His company phone and laptop had been confiscated. The Mercedes keys had been taken. He literally had nothing but his wallet, his personal phone, and the clothes on his back. Jessica had been escorted out through a different exit, probably to avoid them coordinating their stories. David wondered numbly if she blamed him, if she understood yet that their entire relationship had been built on a foundation of lies. Not his lies about the divorce, though those were certainly part of it, but the bigger lie that he'd been a powerful executive on the rise. In reality, he'd been a puppet dancing on strings controlled by the woman he'd discarded. His phone buzzed. Text messages were flooding in. Colleagues asking if the rumors were true, LinkedIn notifications as people viewed his profile, and several messages from numbers he didn't recognize. He ignored them all and called his brother. Mark. I need help. Something happened at work. Something bad. 40 minutes later, David sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from NextGen Tower, explaining the impossible situation to his younger brother. Mark listened with increasing disbelief, his expression cycling through shock, confusion, and eventually something that looked uncomfortably like suppressed laughter. Wait, let me get this straight, Mark said, stirring his coffee slowly. Emma, your wife Emma, who you told me last week was holding you back, and had no ambition. She secretly owns the entire company where you worked. The majority of it. $27 billion worth. And she's owned it the entire time you've been married? Her grandmother left it to her 9 years ago. She's been managing it anonymously through corporate structures. Mark leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. And you kicked her out of an apartment she owns, told her to get a real job, and started an affair with someone who works at her company. I didn't know. David's voice rose, drawing looks from nearby customers. He lowered it to an urgent whisper. How was I supposed to know? She never told me. She let me believe I was the provider, that I was building our life. She lied to me for 8 years. Did she lie? Mark asked carefully, or did she just not correct your assumptions? What's the difference? The difference is whether you ever actually asked her what she did all day, or if you just assumed she was doing nothing because she didn't have a traditional job. David opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Had he ever actually asked Emma detailed questions about how she spent her time? Or had he just listened to her vague references to online courses and volunteer work and filled in the blanks with his own assumptions? She was testing me, David said quietly. Her grandmother told her to stay anonymous, to see who people really were when they didn't know she had power. I failed the test. Yeah, Mark agreed. You really did. What are you going to do now? That was the question David had been avoiding. He pulled up his bank account on his phone. $3,847. His last paycheck had been direct deposited 3 days ago, but most of it had immediately gone to his half of the monthly expenses. Expenses for an apartment he apparently didn't actually live in and utilities he didn't actually pay for. I guess I need to find a place to stay tonight. The loft isn't mine. I don't even have a key anymore. You can stay with me and Sarah for a few days, Mark offered. But David, you need to understand, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Emma's company will pursue the fraud charges. That expense report stuff? That's criminal. And if she's as thorough as she seems, she probably has documentation of everything. David's phone buzzed again. This time he looked, an email from a law firm he didn't recognize. The subject line read, Divorce Proceedings, Hartley Cole versus Cole. He opened it with shaking hands. The email was formal and devastating, outlining Emma's intent to pursue divorce on grounds of adultery, fraud, and breach of the marital prenuptial agreement. Attached was a copy of that prenup, a document David had signed 8 years ago without really reading, trusting that Emma's family lawyer was just being thorough. Now, reading it carefully for the first time, David felt sick. The prenup had an infidelity clause. If either party committed adultery, they forfeited all rights to marital property and could be liable for liquidated damages of up to $5 million. There was a fraud clause. If either party was found to have committed financial fraud affecting the marriage or the other spouse's business interests, they could be liable for treble damages. There were confidentiality clauses, non-disparagement clauses, and a choice of law provision that meant everything would be adjudicated in King County, Washington, where Emma's family had deep legal connections going back decades. Mark, David said, his voice hollow. I think I'm going to lose everything. Not just the marriage. Everything. His brother reached across the table and gripped his shoulder. Then you need to get a good lawyer. Like, immediately. The best lawyer you can afford. I can barely afford a bad lawyer, David muttered. You know what my starting salary was at NextGen? $87,000. Emma approved it. She's approved every raise, every bonus, every promotion for 7 years. My entire career was built on a foundation she constructed, and I never even knew she was there. Did she do it to manipulate you, though? Mark asked. Or did she do it because she loved you and wanted you to succeed? David thought about that, really thought about it. He remembered Emma's face when he'd come home excited about promotions, how genuinely proud she'd seemed. He remembered her insights into office politics, her suggestions for handling difficult projects, advice that had always somehow turned out to be exactly right. He remembered her asking about his work, listening to his problems, offering perspectives he hadn't considered. She hadn't been manipulating him. She'd been supporting him, guiding him, creating opportunities for him, all while he patronized her about her lack of ambition. "I'm an idiot," David whispered. "Yeah," Mark agreed without malice. "You really are. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" While David contemplated his ruin in a coffee shop, Emma Hartley Cole sat in her private office, a space in a downtown building that David had never known existed, and felt something like freedom washing over her. For 8 years, she'd compartmentalized her life so thoroughly that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be whole. The anonymous CEO, the attentive wife, the quiet observer, all of these personas had been fragments of her true self. Now, for the first time since her grandmother's death, she could be completely honest about who she was. Her CFO, Margaret Torres, sat across from her desk, reviewing the financial implications of the morning's revelations. Margaret was 63, brilliant, and had been one of the few people who'd known Emma's true identity from the beginning. "The stock market responded well," Margaret reported, pulling up charts on her tablet. "We're up 7% since the announcement this morning. Investors seem to like having a visible CEO, especially one with your education and pedigree. Several financial publications are already requesting interviews." "What about the internal response?" Emma asked. "Mixed, but generally positive. Some executives are shocked they didn't figure it out. A few are embarrassed about how they've treated you at corporate events over the years. HR is fielding questions about whether there will be more terminations." Margaret paused. "David's assistant came to me in tears this afternoon. Apparently, she tried to invite you to several office functions over the years, and David always shut it down, said you wouldn't be interested or wouldn't understand the conversations." Emma felt a pang of sadness but pushed it aside. "What about the legal situation?" "Legal is pursuing the expense fraud aggressively. They've documented $47,000 in fraudulent claims over 8 months. Possibly more if we dig deeper. Criminal referral goes to the prosecutor's office tomorrow. The company's insurance will cover our losses, but they want to make an example of this to discourage future fraud." "And Jessica Chen?" "She's retained counsel. Her attorney is trying to argue she had no knowledge the expenses were fraudulent, that she believed David's claims about the trips being business-related. It won't work. She signed off on several of the reports herself, and her position should have made her aware of the company's travel policies." Emma nodded slowly. She felt no satisfaction in Jessica's downfall, only a tired resignation. "Make sure legal knows I don't want unnecessary cruelty. Termination and recovery of fraudulent funds, yes. But we're not trying to destroy her life." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You're being generous, considering she was sleeping with your husband." "She was sleeping with a man who told her he was divorced and on his way to becoming CEO. David lied to her almost as much as he misjudged me. She made poor choices, but he's the one who betrayed wedding vows." Emma pulled up her personal calendar. "What's my schedule looking like?" "You have interview requests from Forbes, Bloomberg, Fortune, and the Seattle Times. The Women in Business Leadership Conference wants you as their keynote speaker. And you have lunch scheduled with Dr. Patricia Chen from Seattle Medical Center. She wants to discuss expanding our partnership with their hospital network." Emma smiled. Dr. Patricia Chen was someone she'd worked with for years through her anonymous corporate identity. Now they could finally meet as equals, face to face. "Confirm the lunch." As for the interviews, let's start with local media. Seattle Times first, then we'll consider national publications. Her personal phone buzzed, her actual personal phone, not the generic device she'd carried when pretending to be an ordinary housewife. The caller ID showed her closest friend, Rachel Kim, who was also one of the few people who'd known the truth about Emma's identity. "I saw the news," Rachel said without preamble when Emma answered. "Are you okay?" "Honestly, I'm better than I've been in years." "Really? Because you just publicly destroyed your marriage and your husband's career. That has to hurt, even if he deserved it." Emma walked to the window, looking out over the Seattle skyline. The next-gen building was visible from here, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that represented everything her grandmother had built. "It does hurt. I loved him, Rachel. I really did. But I loved who I thought he was, and he loved who he thought I was. Neither of those people actually existed. What happens now? Now I run my company publicly, finalize the divorce, and figure out who Emma Hartley Cole actually is when she's not hiding." "That's terrifying," Rachel observed. "Yes," Emma agreed. "But it's also exhilarating. For 8 years, I've been performing at corporate events, pretending to be someone I'm not, biting my tongue when people patronized me. Do you know how many times David's colleagues asked me what I did, and when I gave vague answers, they just assumed I was unemployed? How many times people talked over me at dinner parties because they thought I had nothing valuable to contribute? Too many times. I attended a healthcare technology conference 6 months ago as David's wife. I listened to a panel discussion about AI integration in patient records, something I'd personally overseen the development of at NextGen. The panelists were literally discussing my company's technology, and when I tried to ask a question, the moderator dismissed me because he assumed I was just a spouse tagging along with no actual understanding of the field. Rachel made a sympathetic sound. "And now when I walk into a room, people will know exactly who I am. They'll know I built this. They'll know I'm not someone to be dismissed or patronized. And David," her voice caught slightly, "David will have to live with the knowledge that he threw away something extraordinary because he was too arrogant to see it. Do you think he understands yet? Really understands?" Emma thought about the look on David's face in the conference room, the dawning horror as reality crashed down on him. "He's starting to. But understanding intellectually that I'm wealthy and powerful is different from understanding emotionally what he actually lost. That will take longer. Are you going to help him at all?" "Should I?" Emma asked genuinely. "He committed fraud, Rachel. He cheated on me. He told me I was dead weight with no ambition and literally kicked me out of my own apartment. No, he doesn't deserve help. I'm just wondering if you'll give it anyway, because that's who you are." Emma didn't answer. She didn't know yet what she would do when David inevitably hit bottom. Part of her wanted to let him fall completely, to experience real consequences for his actions. But another part, the part that had loved him genuinely for years, couldn't quite let go of the man she'd thought he was. "We'll see," she finally said. "Right now, I have a company to run and a life to rebuild. David's choices are his own problem." 3 weeks after his termination, David Cole sat in a windowless office meeting with his attorney, Lawrence Brennan, a competent but not exceptional lawyer he could barely afford. The news was universally bad. "The fraud charges are proceeding," Brennan said, flipping through documents. "The prosecutor's office has decided to file misdemeanor theft charges. If convicted, you're looking at up to 90 days in jail, though more likely probation and restitution. The problem is the restitution amount. $47,000 plus penalties and interest could push it over $60,000. "I don't have $60,000, David said flatly. "I don't have $6,000. Then we need to negotiate a payment plan. But there's a bigger problem." Brennan pulled out another file. "Emma's divorce attorneys are pursuing the prenup's fraud clause. They're claiming your expense fraud financially harmed her business interests, which triggers treble damages under the contract. Their calculation puts your liability at approximately $180,000. David felt the room spin. That's insane. How does my expense fraud harm her business interests? She owns the company, David. Any fraud against the company is fraud against her. And the prenup language is broad enough that her attorneys have a strong argument. Brennan leaned back. There's also the infidelity clause. That alone disqualifies you from any marital property and opens you to liquidated damages of up to $5 million. Emma's attorneys are being somewhat merciful. They're only pursuing $500,000 in liquidated damages instead of the full amount. Only $500,000, David repeated numbly. How is that mercy? Because they could pursue more, and they'd probably win. The prenup language is airtight. Your attorney should have caught this when you signed it, but, Brennan shrugged apologetically, these clauses are sometimes buried in dense legalese. Emma's family attorneys are exceptionally good at their jobs. David put his head in his hands. So I owe $60,000 in restitution and potentially $680,000 in civil damages. I have $1,200 in my bank account and no job. How is this even possible? The short answer? You signed a contract you didn't fully understand and then violated it in multiple ways. The longer answer is that you were married to someone with significant resources and legal sophistication, and you underestimated the consequences of your actions. I didn't know she was rich. That's not actually a legal defense, David. The prenup was valid regardless of your knowledge of her wealth. Brennan softened slightly. Look, we can fight some of this. We can argue the liquidated damages are punitive rather than compensatory. We can negotiate payment plans. But you need to understand, you're going to be dealing with the financial consequences of this for years, possibly decades. After leaving Brennan's office, David walked aimlessly through downtown Seattle, barely noticing the rain that had started to fall. His life had imploded so completely that he couldn't find the boundaries of the disaster. Every direction he looked revealed new wreckage. He'd applied to 17 jobs in the past 3 weeks. 4 had rejected him immediately once they ran background checks and discovered his termination. 7 hadn't responded at all. The remaining 6 were considering his applications, but David had received cautious phone calls from 2 HR departments asking him to explain the circumstances of his departure from NextGen Healthcare Solutions. Once he'd explained, the calls had ended politely but definitively. News of his termination had spread through Seattle's tech and healthcare communities with the speed of a wildfire. The story was too sensational not to share. The CTO who'd kicked out his billionaire wife, not knowing she owned the company where he worked. It had appeared in industry newsletters, been discussed on LinkedIn, and even made a brief appearance in a Seattle Times business section article about corporate governance and anonymous ownership structures. David had become a cautionary tale. A punchline. The guy who was so arrogant he didn't recognize a billionaire sleeping next to him for 8 years. His phone rang, his mother calling for the 3rd time that day. He declined it. He couldn't bear to explain again what had happened, to hear the disappointment in her voice, to answer her questions about how he could have been so blind, so stupid, so cruel to Emma. Because that was the worst part. The more distance he got from the immediate shock, the more clearly he could see his own behavior. The casual cruelty of his comments about Emma having no ambition. The condescension when he'd suggested she get even a part-time job to give her purpose. The way he'd excluded her from corporate events because she wouldn't understand the conversations. She'd understood the conversations better than anyone. She'd been having those conversations at the highest levels while he was still a mid-level manager. And he'd been too wrapped up in his own ego to notice. Jessica had texted him twice since their termination, but he hadn't responded. What would he say? That he was sorry for lying about being divorced? That he was sorry their affair had cost them both their careers? The truth was, he wasn't even sure he'd felt anything real for Jessica. Looking back, their relationship seemed like another symptom of his arrogance. He'd wanted someone who made him feel important, who reflected back the image he wanted to see of himself as a powerful executive on the rise. Emma had never reflected that image. She'd just loved him, supported him, and quietly built the foundation that made his success possible. And he'd despised her for it. David found himself standing outside the next-gen building, staring up at the gleaming tower. Somewhere in there, Emma was working, actually working, not pretending to be unemployed while secretly managing an empire. She was attending meetings, making decisions, being visible in ways she'd hidden from him for their entire marriage. Had she been happy, pretending? Or had it hurt her, watching him succeed with her help while he treated her like she was worthless? He pulled out his phone and opened his text conversation with Emma. Their last exchange was from 4 weeks ago, when he'd texted her that he'd be home late and she'd replied with a simple, "Okay." He started typing. "I'm sorry." He deleted it. "Too simple. Too inadequate. I understand now what I did to you. What I lost." He deleted that too. Still not enough. Finally, he just typed, "Can we talk? Please." He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without sending. Emma didn't owe him a conversation. She didn't owe him anything. He'd forfeited his right to her attention when he'd packed his bags and told her to leave their home, her home, by the end of the month. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through his jacket. David walked back toward his brother's apartment, where he'd been sleeping on the couch for 3 weeks, and wondered if this was rock bottom or if he still had further to fall. He was about to find out. Emma stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, watching the city lights flicker through the evening rain. It had been 4 weeks since the conference room confrontation, and she was still adjusting to life in the spotlight. The Forbes interview had published yesterday, accompanied by a photo of her in the next-gen boardroom, looking every inch the billionaire CEO she'd always been. The headline read, "The Billionaire Who Hid in Plain Sight, Emma Hartley Cole's 8-Year Secret." The article had been fair, even sympathetic. It told the story of her grandmother's legacy, the condition of anonymity, and her quiet observation of how people treated her when they thought she had no power. It mentioned David only obliquely, referring to personal circumstances that made public disclosure necessary. Emma had insisted on that. She wasn't interested in publicly humiliating David beyond what had already happened. The termination was punishment enough. Or was it? Margaret knocked on her open door. "You have a visitor. Patricia Reeves is in the lobby asking to see you. She says she's David's mother." Emma's heart sank. She'd known this was coming eventually. Send her up. Patricia Reeves was 62, elegantly dressed, and clearly nervous. Emma remembered her from holiday dinners and occasional family gatherings, a kind woman who'd always treated Emma with warmth, even when David had started making dismissive comments about Emma's lack of career. "Mrs. Reeves," Emma said, gesturing to the seating area of her office. "Please, sit down." "Thank you for seeing me," Patricia said, settling into a chair. "I wasn't sure you would. You were always kind to me. I have no reason not to." Patricia smiled sadly. "I wish I'd been more observant. I should have noticed how David was treating you, especially this past year. I should have said something. It wasn't your responsibility to manage your son's marriage." "No, but it was my responsibility to raise a son who treated people with respect, regardless of their career or income. And clearly, I failed at that." Patricia's hands twisted in her lap. "Emma, I'm not here to ask you to take him back. I understand that's not possible, and honestly, I'm not sure it would be healthy for either of you. But I'm asking you to consider showing some mercy in the legal matters." Emma had been expecting this. "The fraud charges aren't mine to dismiss, Mrs. Reeves. He used company funds illegally. The prosecutor is handling that. I understand. But the civil damages, the prenup penalties. Emma, they'll bankrupt him. He'll be paying those debts for the rest of his life." "He committed adultery and fraud," Emma said quietly. "The prenup clearly outlined the consequences. I didn't create those terms to trap him. I created them to protect myself from exactly this situation." "I know. And he deserves consequences. But $680,000? Emma, that's not justice. That's destruction." Emma walked back to the window, watching the rain. "What would you consider justice, Mrs. Reeves?" I don't know. Accountability, yes. Financial consequences, yes. But not debt that will follow him into old age. Not punishment so severe that he can never rebuild his life. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. He's living on his brother's couch. He can't find work because the story has spread through every industry in Seattle. He's depressed, ashamed, and completely broken. Isn't that enough? Emma felt the familiar tug of compassion warring with her anger. He called me dead weight. He said I contributed nothing to his life. He kicked me out of my own home to be with another woman. He committed fraud using resources from the company my grandmother built. Where was his mercy when he was doing those things? There wasn't any, Patricia admitted. He was cruel, arrogant, and blind. He's paying for that now. He's lost his wife, his career, his reputation, his home. But Emma, you have the power to decide whether he pays for it for 1 year or 40 years. That's a choice only you can make. After Patricia left, Emma sat alone in her office for a long time. The rain continued to fall, and the city lights blurred into abstract patterns. She thought about her grandmother's test, about hidden power revealing truth. David had failed that test spectacularly. But what did it say about Emma if she used her power to crush him completely? She called her attorney. I want to renegotiate the civil damages, Emma said when he answered. Not eliminate them, but restructure them in a way that's punitive but not destructive. Emma, you have every legal right to pursue the full amount. The prenup is clear. I know. But I'm not interested in destroying David. I'm interested in him understanding consequences and hopefully becoming a better person. There's a difference. What did you have in mind? Emma thought carefully. The infidelity liquidated damages, reduced them from $500,000 to $100,000, payable over 10 years at $10,000 annually. That's significant but manageable if he rebuilds his career. The fraud treble damages, I'll waive them entirely. The company has already recovered its losses through the criminal restitution. I don't need to pile on. That's generous, Emma. More generous than he deserves. Maybe. But I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it because I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know that I used my power responsibly. My grandmother told me that power reveals character. Well, I want my character revealed to be someone who demands accountability but also shows measured mercy. I'll draft the revised settlement terms. After she hung up, Emma pulled out her personal phone and did something she'd been avoiding for weeks. She texted David. Your mother visited me today. I've instructed my attorneys to reduce the civil damages to a manageable amount. You'll still face consequences. $100,000 over 10 years plus whatever the court orders for the criminal restitution. But it won't destroy your entire future. She paused, then added. This isn't forgiveness, David. This is me choosing to be better than my anger. Use this chance to become someone better than the man you were. Don't waste it. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. 3 minutes later, her phone rang. David's number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. Emma. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Yes, I do. I need you to know that I understand now. Not just that you're wealthy and powerful. I understand what I actually lost. I lost someone who loved me enough to support my dreams while hiding her own achievements. Someone who gave me opportunities one never earned. Someone who was brilliant and capable and extraordinary. And I treated her like she was worthless. Emma felt tears forming but blinked them back. You did. I know I can't fix this. I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't. But I swear to you, Emma, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better than the man who hurt you. Not because I think it will change your mind about me, but because I finally understand what my grandmother was trying to teach you. I saw who people really were when they thought I had no power, and I failed that test. Badly. Yes, you did. Thank you for the mercy. I don't deserve it, but thank you. You're right. You don't deserve it. But I'm not giving it to you because you deserve it. I'm giving it to you because I deserve to move forward without the weight of completely destroying someone I once loved. This is for me, David. Not for you. I understand. And Emma, I genuinely hope you find someone who sees you. All of you. Someone who loves the real you, not the version you have to hide. Emma ended the call and sat in the quiet of her office, feeling something like closure settling over her. She'd revealed her power, demanded accountability, and chosen measured justice over revenge. Her grandmother would have been proud. Now it was time to move forward into whatever came next. David Cole stood in the modest office of Evergreen Community Health Clinic, reviewing patient data on his laptop. It wasn't glamorous work. The clinic served low-income patients in South Seattle, operated on a shoestring budget, and paid him $62,000 a year as their IT coordinator. It was a far cry from his $780,000 CTO salary at NextGen. But it was honest work, and David was grateful for it. The director, Dr. James Morrison, had taken a chance on him after every other employer in Seattle had turned him away. Dr. Morrison had looked at David's resume, listened to his explanation of what had happened at NextGen, and said something David would never forget. We all make mistakes, Mr. Cole. Some of us make catastrophic ones. The question isn't whether you failed, it's whether you learned from it. Convince me you've learned something, and we'll give you a chance. David had convinced him. Barely. And for the past 5 months, he'd thrown himself into the work with a dedication he'd never felt before. He upgraded their patient management system, secured grants for new equipment, and even volunteered weekend hours to teach digital literacy classes to elderly patients struggling with telehealth appointments. It wasn't prestigious. It wouldn't make him rich. But it mattered, and that made all the difference. His phone buzzed with a reminder. Monthly payment to Emma's attorneys, $833.33. He'd set up automatic payments to ensure he never missed one. In 10 years, he'd pay off the $100,000 settlement. The criminal restitution was on a separate payment plan, $400 monthly for 5 years. Between the two obligations, rent and living expenses, David lived modestly. Very modestly. He'd moved out of his brother's apartment into a studio in the Central District. He rode the bus instead of driving. He cooked at home instead of dining out. He shopped at thrift stores and had learned to appreciate simple pleasures. A good book from the library, a walk around Green Lake, coffee with Mark on Sunday mornings. David. One of the nurses poked her head into his office. Mrs. Chen is having trouble with the patient portal again. Can you help? Of course. David followed her to the waiting room, where an elderly woman was staring at a tablet with visible frustration. He spent 20 minutes patiently walking her through the login process, setting up password recovery, and showing her how to view her test results. You're very patient, Mrs. Chen said when they finished. My grandson works in computers, but he always makes me feel stupid when I ask questions. Technology should make life easier, not harder, David replied. If it's confusing, that's the system's fault, not yours. As he walked back to his office, he thought about how differently he would have handled that interaction a year ago. He would have been impatient, dismissive, focused on how much time it was taking away from more important tasks. Now he understood that Mrs. Chen's ability to access her health records was an important task, maybe the most important one. That evening, David met his mother for dinner at a casual Thai restaurant near her house. Patricia had aged visibly over the past months, worry lines deepening around her eyes. She studied him carefully as they ate. You look better, she finally said. Healthier, somehow. I'm eating better. Sleeping better. I went hiking last weekend for the first time in years. I mean emotionally, David. You look lighter. He considered that. I think I am. I'm not carrying around the weight of pretending to be someone I'm not anymore. The life I had before, the expensive apartment, the luxury car, the prestigious title, it was all built on a foundation I didn't even know existed. Emma's foundation. Now I'm building something myself, from scratch. It's small and humble, but it's real. Have you heard from her at all? No. I send the monthly payments, but I don't reach out. She made it clear, the reduced settlement was for her peace of mind, not an invitation to reconnect. He paused. I saw an article about her last week. She donated $50 million to women's healthcare initiatives. There was a photo of her at some gala, standing next to the governor. How did that make you feel? Proud, actually. And sad. Proud that she's using her resources to make a real difference. Sad that I spent 8 years with an extraordinary woman and never truly saw her. He met his mother's eyes. I'm not the victim here, Mom. I know that. I destroyed my own life through arrogance and cruelty. Emma just removed the safety net I didn't know I was standing on. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm glad you understand that. And I'm proud of you for doing the work to become better. It's the least I can do. Meanwhile, across town, Emma sat in a completely different restaurant, an upscale waterfront establishment, with a man named Daniel Park. He was 42, a successful architect who'd built his firm from nothing, and they'd met 3 months ago at a sustainable design conference. Daniel knew exactly who Emma was. He'd known from the moment they met, had even read the Forbes article about her. But he'd approached her with respect, genuine interest, and no apparent agenda beyond enjoying her company. So, Daniel said, refilling her wine glass, tell me about the new hospital wing design. Are you still planning the meditation garden on the roof? Emma smiled. This was what she'd been missing, someone who engaged with her ideas, who treated her intelligence as attractive rather than threatening, who didn't need to feel superior to her to feel good about himself. We are, but we're having trouble with the weight-load calculations. The soil depth we need for mature trees might exceed what the structure can handle. Have you considered a hydroponic system? You could reduce soil weight by 60% and still support significant plant life. They dove into a detailed discussion of engineering solutions, green space design, and patient wellness outcomes. Daniel sketched ideas on his napkin. Emma offered insights from her research on hospital environments. It was stimulating, engaging, and effortless. I have a confession, Daniel said as they finished dinner. When I first saw you at that conference, I was intimidated. Billionaire CEO, runs a major healthcare company, brilliant mind. I almost didn't approach you. What changed your mind? You were standing alone, looking at a vertical garden display, and you had this expression of pure fascination, like a kid at a science museum. It made you seem human, approachable. So I walked over and asked what you thought of the design, and you gave me this incredibly detailed analysis of why the plant selection was wrong for the microclimate. Emma laughed. The plant selection was wrong. It absolutely was. And I thought, here's a woman who knows her stuff and isn't afraid to say so. That's attractive. Even though I'm a billionaire who could buy your company. Especially because you're a billionaire who could buy my company but chooses to treat me like an equal anyway. Daniel reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, asking permission. Emma, I like you. Not your money, not your company, not your power. You. The woman who gets excited about vertical gardens and hospital meditation spaces. The woman who sends me articles about biomimicry in architecture at 2 in the morning. That's who I want to get to know better. Emma placed her hand in his, feeling something warm and hopeful unfurling in her chest. I'd like that too. As she drove home that night, Emma thought about the journey from hiding her identity to embracing it fully. She'd lost her marriage, yes. But she'd gained something more valuable. The freedom to be completely herself, without apology or concealment. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. How was the date? Emma replied. Really good. He sees me. All of you. All of me. And that, Emma reflected, made all the difference. 8 months after the conference room confrontation, Emma received a phone call that changed everything. She was in a board meeting when her assistant interrupted, something that never happened unless it was truly urgent. I'm sorry, Ms. Hartley Cole, but you need to take this call. It's Seattle Presbyterian Hospital about your grandfather's medical records. Emma felt ice flood her veins. My grandfather died 7 years ago. I know. You should take the call. Emma excused herself and answered the phone in her private office. 10 minutes later, she sat in stunned silence, processing what she'd just learned. The hospital had been conducting a routine audit of old medical files and discovered something troubling. Records showing that her grandfather had been misdiagnosed with terminal cancer. The condition that supposedly killed him, the reason he'd left her the company with such urgency, may have been a medical error. If the new analysis was correct, William Hartley might have had a treatable condition. He might not have died at all. The implications were staggering. Had her grandfather known? Had someone at the hospital covered up the error? And most disturbingly, had his death, which had shaped the entire trajectory of Emma's adult life, been preventable? Emma spent the next week immersed in medical records, legal consultations, and painful conversations with the hospital's ethics board. The evidence was damning. A radiologist had misread a scan, an oncologist had failed to order confirmatory tests, and the institutional safeguards that should have caught the error had failed. Her grandfather had died believing he had months to live. He'd arranged his affairs, said his goodbyes, and passed on his legacy, all based on a misdiagnosis. Emma felt grief rising fresh and sharp, as if she were losing him all over again. But beneath the grief was anger. Righteous, burning anger at the medical system that had failed him. She called a press conference. The room was packed with journalists, healthcare advocates, and industry observers. Emma stood at the podium, professional but clearly emotional, and told the story. She spoke about her grandfather's misdiagnosis, the institutional failures that led to his preventable death, and her determination to ensure it never happened to another patient. I'm announcing the Hartley Medical Oversight Initiative, she said, her voice steady. Next-gen healthcare solutions will commit $200 million over the next 5 years to developing AI-assisted diagnostic systems, funding independent medical second opinion programs, and establishing patient advocacy positions in hospitals nationwide. No family should lose someone because of preventable medical error. The announcement made national news. Emma became a vocal advocate for patient safety, testifying before Congress and meeting with healthcare leaders across the country. The work was exhausting and emotionally draining, but it gave her grandfather's death meaning beyond the original test he designed for her. What she didn't expect was the email from David. Emma, I saw your press conference about your grandfather. I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved him, and learning that his death was preventable must be devastating. I realize I have no right to reach out, and you probably don't want to hear from me. But I remember how you used to talk about him, the stories you'd tell about his wisdom and kindness. I was usually only half listening, too focused on my own concerns to truly appreciate what those memories meant to you. I'm listening now. And I'm sorry for everything you're going through. If there's any way I can help with the initiative, my technical skills, my experience with healthcare IT systems, anything, I'm offering. Not because I expect anything from you, but because what you're doing matters, and if I can contribute even in a small way, I want to. David. Emma stared at the email for a long time. Her first instinct was to delete it, to maintain the clean separation they'd established. But something in his words felt genuine, not manipulative or self-serving, just honestly offering support. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she called Daniel, who'd become her closest confidant over the past few months. David emailed me, she said, offering to help with the Medical Oversight Initiative. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Suspicious, touched, confused. She sighed. Part of me thinks he's just trying to get back in my good graces. But another part remembers that he actually is good at healthcare IT. His work at the clinic has been solid. I've heard about it through industry contacts. Do you want him involved? I want the initiative to succeed. If David can genuinely contribute, it seems petty to refuse just because of our history. But I'm also terrified of opening that door again, even professionally. Then set clear boundaries, Daniel suggested. If you bring him on, make it explicitly professional. Contract work, limited interaction, specific deliverables. He helps with the technical aspects, you maintain distance, and the initiative benefits. Emma considered that. It made sense. She could separate her personal feelings from the professional opportunity. She'd built an entire company while maintaining secrecy. Surely she could manage a limited professional engagement with her ex-husband. She replied to David's email. David, thank you for your condolences. The initiative needs experienced healthcare IT professionals who understand diagnostic systems. If you're genuinely interested in contributing, I can offer a contract position, remote work, specific technical projects, market rate compensation. This would be strictly professional. We would not be working directly together. You would report to my CTO and interact with the development team. I'm offering this because the initiative needs good people, not as any kind of personal reconciliation. If you're interested under those terms, respond with your updated resume and I'll have HR reach out. Emma. David's response came within an hour. His resume, a brief note accepting the terms, and a single additional line. Thank you for trusting me to be part of something that matters. 2 weeks later, David started contract work on the diagnostic AI project. He worked from home, attended virtual meetings with the development team, and delivered quality code that impressed the technical staff. Emma monitored his work through reports from her CTO but maintained her stated distance. It was working. They were both professionals, both committed to a cause larger than their personal history, and both capable of maintaining appropriate boundaries. Until the day David's code accidentally saved a life. The diagnostic AI system was still in pilot testing at 3 hospitals. It was designed to flag potential misdiagnoses and recommend second opinions. One afternoon, the system flagged a case at Seattle Presbyterian, a patient diagnosed with anxiety attacks who the AI suggested might actually be experiencing cardiac arrhythmia. The attending physician ordered the recommended tests. The AI was right. The patient was rushed into emergency surgery and survived, but wouldn't have if the original anxiety diagnosis had stood. The hospital called Emma personally to report the success. Your system just saved a life, the chief of medicine said. The code architecture that caught this? Your contractor, David Cole, designed it. He built in a pattern recognition algorithm specifically for cases where stress symptoms mask cardiac conditions. It's brilliant work. Emma sat with that information, feeling complicated emotions wash over her. David had created something meaningful. He'd taken his skills, the same skills she'd helped him develop through years of invisible support, and used them to genuinely help people. Maybe, she thought, people really could change. Maybe the man who'd failed her grandfather's test was learning to pass a different test. The test of using his abilities for something beyond his own advancement. She pulled up her email and wrote, David, I heard about the cardiac case your algorithm caught. Well done. That patient is alive because of your work. That matters. Keep up the good work. Emma. His response was simple. Thank you. It feels good to build something that actually helps people instead of just advancing my career. I'm learning to measure success differently now. Emma closed the email and returned to her work, but something had shifted. Not forgiveness, necessarily. Not reconciliation. But perhaps the beginning of acceptance that people were complex, that failure and growth could coexist, and that sometimes the best thing you could do for someone was give them the opportunity to become better than they'd been. 1 year after the conference room confrontation, Emma stood in the completed meditation garden atop NextGen's new patient wellness wing. Daniel had designed it beautifully, a serene space with flowing water features, carefully selected plants that thrived in Seattle's climate, and comfortable seating areas where patients and families could find peace during difficult times. It was evening, and the city lights were beginning to glow across the skyline. Emma had come here to think, to process, and to make a decision about what came next. The Hartley Medical Oversight Initiative had exceeded every expectation. The diagnostic AI system was now deployed in 27 hospitals across the country. It had caught 43 potential misdiagnoses in its first year, leading to corrected treatments and, in 11 cases, life-saving interventions. Patient advocacy positions had been established in 42 hospitals. The Second Opinion program was serving thousands of patients annually. Her grandfather's preventable death had become the catalyst for change that would save countless lives. Emma found comfort in that, even as the grief remained. David's contract work had continued throughout the year. He'd proven reliable, innovative, and genuinely committed to the mission. Her CTO praised his work regularly. The development team respected him. And Emma had to admit, if only to herself, that his contributions had been valuable. But more than his technical work, Emma had noticed something else. David's entire approach to life seemed to have shifted. She heard about it through indirect channels. The clinic director who mentioned how David volunteered weekends teaching seniors about technology. The board member who saw David's name on a modest donation list for a homeless shelter. Mark's comment during a chance encounter that his brother had become a different person, in a good way. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Still at the garden? I can bring coffee. She smiled. Please. And maybe dinner? On my way. While she waited, Emma pulled out her laptop and opened the file she'd been avoiding for weeks. Recommendations for permanent positions on the Hartley Initiative technical team. David's name was at the top, with a glowing review from her CTO recommending him for a full-time role as senior systems architect. She could approve it with a click. Or she could pass him over, maintaining the professional distance they'd established. Emma. Daniel's voice came from the garden entrance. He carried 2 coffees and a bag from their favorite Thai place. You've been up here for 2 hours. Your assistant was getting worried. They sat on one of the benches, and Emma showed him the recommendation file. I don't know what to do. Objectively, David deserves the position. He's done exceptional work. But he's your ex-husband who betrayed you in the worst possible way, Daniel finished. And bringing him into a permanent role feels like validating what he did. Exactly. Daniel sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Can I tell you what I see from the outside? David was an arrogant jerk who took you for granted and destroyed his own life through his actions. That's true. But it's also true that he faced real consequences, hit rock bottom, and appears to be genuinely trying to become a better person. You gave him a chance to contribute meaningfully, and he's done that. So you think I should give him the job? I think you should make whatever decision lets you move forward without regret. If you pass him over, will you wonder if you were being petty? If you hire him, will you feel like you're letting him off too easy? There's no wrong answer, Emma. Only the answer that's right for you. Emma thought about her grandfather's test. Hidden power reveals truth. David had failed that test once, spectacularly. But maybe the more important question wasn't whether someone passed a test once, but whether they learned from failing it. She made her decision. The next morning, Emma scheduled a video call with David, their first direct interaction in over a year. When he appeared on screen, she was struck by how different he looked. Thinner, yes, but also more grounded somehow. Less polished but more genuine. Emma, he said, clearly nervous. Thank you for taking the call. I've reviewed your work on the Hartley Initiative, she began, keeping her voice professional. Your technical contributions have been excellent. The CTO has recommended you for a permanent position as Senior Systems Architect. Hope flickered across David's face, quickly suppressed. I'd be honored to accept, if you're offering. I am. But I need to be clear about something first. This position is being offered because you've earned it through your work, not because of any personal history between us. You'll work with the technical team, report to the CTO, and contribute to a mission that saves lives. That's all this is. I understand. And Emma, thank you. Not just for the job, but for giving me the chance to be part of something meaningful. I know I don't deserve your trust, and I'm not asking for it. But I promise I won't let the team down. Emma nodded. One more thing, David. I've been thinking about what my grandfather taught me, that hidden power reveals truth. You failed that test when we were married. You showed me exactly who you were when you thought I had no power. David flinched but didn't look away. I did. But I've been wondering if there's a second test that matters just as much. What people do after they fail the first one. Do they make excuses? Blame others? Stay bitter? Or do they actually learn, change, and try to become better? What test am I passing now? He asked quietly. The test of what you do when you truly have nothing. No safety net, no invisible support, no advantage except your own effort and character. From what I can see, you're passing that test. You're doing meaningful work, helping people, living modestly and honestly. That matters. David. It doesn't erase what you did, but it matters. Tears appeared in David's eyes. I think about what I lost every single day. Not the money or the prestige, you. The extraordinary woman I was too blind and arrogant to see. I know I can never fix that, but I swear I'm trying to become someone who would have deserved you in the first place. You don't need to deserve me, David. You need to deserve yourself. Work hard, contribute meaningfully, build a good life. That's enough. After the call ended, Emma sat back in her chair and felt something like closure settling over her. She'd given David consequences, then mercy, then opportunity. What he did with those things was his responsibility now, not hers. That evening, she had dinner with Daniel at his loft apartment. He'd cooked, a skill he'd learned from his Korean grandmother, and they ate on his balcony overlooking Elliott Bay. I offered David the permanent position, Emma said. How do you feel about it? Good, actually. Like I'm making decisions based on what's right rather than what feels satisfying. He's genuinely good at the work, and the initiative benefits from having him. That's what matters. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. I'm proud of you. It takes real strength to separate personal hurt from professional judgment. I learned from the best. My grandmother always said that true power isn't about controlling people. It's about making ethical choices even when no one would blame you for choosing differently. Your grandmother sounds like she was remarkable. She was. I wish you could have met her. Emma paused. Actually, I want to tell you something. About why I'm able to do this, to move forward, to show David measured mercy, to build something new. I'm listening. It's because of you. Because you see all of me, the billionaire CEO and the woman who gets excited about vertical gardens. You treat my success as something to celebrate rather than something that threatens you. You make me feel like I don't have to hide or diminish myself to be loved. Daniel squeezed her hand. Emma, loving you isn't hard. Being with someone brilliant and accomplished and kind? That's not threatening, that's inspiring. You make me want to be better, to build more beautiful things, to contribute more meaningfully. That's what real partnership looks like. Is that what this is? A partnership? I hope so. If you want it to be. Emma smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. I do. 3 months later, Emma stood at another podium, but this time it wasn't a press conference or a board meeting. It was the opening ceremony for the Hartley Center for Medical Excellence, a state-of-the-art diagnostic facility funded by NextGen and designed to implement every lesson learned from her grandfather's preventable death. The audience included healthcare leaders, politicians, patient advocates, and members of her technical team. David was there too, sitting in the back row, professional and reserved. He'd been working at NextGen for 2 months now, and the arrangement was working well. They exchanged occasional emails about technical matters, passed each other in hallways with polite nods, and maintained the professional boundaries they'd established. It was enough. It had to be enough. Emma's speech focused on her grandfather's legacy, on the lives saved by better diagnostic tools, and on her vision for a healthcare system that caught errors before they became tragedies. She didn't mention her personal story, the hidden identity, the failed marriage, the painful revelation. That chapter of her life was closed. After the ceremony, Emma found herself alone in the Hartley Center's main atrium, a soaring space with natural light and living walls, designed to feel hopeful rather than clinical. She was admiring Daniel's architectural work when she heard footsteps behind her. "It's beautiful," David said quietly. "Your grandfather would have been proud." Emma turned, surprised to see him. "Thank you. And thank you for your work on the diagnostic systems. They're the heart of what we're building here. I'm just glad to be part of it." David hesitated. "Emma, I know we've maintained professional distance, and that's appropriate. But I wanted to tell you something, just once, and then I'll never bring it up again." "What is it?" "I've spent the past year trying to understand what I lost when I lost you. And I finally realized, I didn't just lose my wife. I lost my moral compass. You were always the ethical center of our relationship, the person who thought about consequences and treated people with respect. I dismissed that as weakness, as lack of ambition. But it was actually strength. The strongest thing about you." Emma felt tears threatening but kept her voice steady. "Thank you for saying that." "I'm not asking for anything," David continued quickly. "I'm not trying to get back together or even rebuild a friendship. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see you now. And I'm sorry it took losing everything to open my eyes. David, I genuinely hope you build a good life. I hope you find someone who values you and whom you value properly. I hope you keep doing meaningful work. But you're right, we can't be friends. Too much has happened." "I know. And that's okay. Some mistakes have permanent consequences. I'm living with mine, and honestly, I'm becoming okay with that." He smiled sadly. "I saw you with Daniel at the last board meeting. He looks at you the way I should have looked at you. Like you're extraordinary. I'm glad you found that." "So am I." David nodded and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the atrium. Emma watched him go, feeling no regret, no longing, just a quiet acknowledgement that people were complex, that growth was possible, and that some chapters of life needed to close completely before new ones could truly begin. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel. Dinner tonight? I want to celebrate the center opening properly." Emma smiled and replied, "Yes. Your place or mine?" "Yours. I want to see the view from that ridiculous penthouse you secretly own." She laughed and typed, "It's not ridiculous. It's perfectly reasonable for a billionaire CEO. It's ridiculous and I love it. Just like I love you." Emma's breath caught. They hadn't said those words yet. She typed carefully, "I love you too. See you at 7? 7 is perfect." As Emma left the Hartley Center, she thought about the past year. The pain of betrayal, the power of revelation, the satisfaction of justice, and the peace of moving forward. She'd been tested by her grandfather's condition, had tested David in turn, and had ultimately tested herself. Could she wield power responsibly? Could she demand accountability while showing measured mercy? Could she build something meaningful from the ashes of her broken marriage? The answer to all three questions was yes. She'd been the invisible billionaire, the underestimated wife, the hidden hand guiding her husband's career. But that era was over. Now she was simply Emma Hartley Cole, CEO, philanthropist, advocate, and woman who'd learned that the most important kind of power wasn't the power to control others, but the power to control herself. Her reactions, her choices, her future. David would continue his redemption arc, or he wouldn't. That was his story now, not hers. Emma's story was about building a life with someone who truly saw her, creating systems that saved lives, and honoring her grandfather's legacy by using her wealth and influence for genuine good. She'd been discarded as worthless and had proven her worth beyond measure. But more importantly, she'd proven something to herself, that her value didn't come from others recognizing it. It had been there all along, whether David saw it or not, whether the world knew about it or not. Emma Hartley Cole had finally stepped fully into the light. And the view from here was extraordinary. The end. Thank you so much for reading this 10-chapter journey. If you enjoyed Emma's story of hidden power and ultimate triumph, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by others' recognition of it. What did you think of Emma's journey? Should she have been harder on David, or was her measured mercy the right choice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next story. We post new compelling narratives every week about strength, resilience, and the power of knowing your worth. Remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most powerful. Never underestimate anyone. Until next time. Sparkles.